Hi, this is Amber Horsburgh. I'm the creator of Deep Cuts and I run Fanbase Accelerator. You're listening to Your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay and Mike. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Hypebot and Mark Mulligan at MIDiA, with 100,000 tracks uploaded daily, a long-tail music cull is coming.
From Bloomberg, record labels ask TikTok to share more of its $12 billion.
From Billboard, sped-up songs are taking over TikTok and driving songs up the charts.
And from Marketplace, YouTube's automated copyright tool riles up musicians. Oh my goodness, Jay, so many things to talk about. Yes, you are with Jay and Mike. This is the Your Morning Coffee podcast, and Jay and Mike will start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
All right, Jay, so nice to see you, brother, on a Sunday. We kind of bounce between Saturday and Sunday. So we're Sunday in the afternoon.
Yeah.
It's a good day. It's a more sunny day here in Southern California.
Yeah, typically it's Saturdays, but, sometimes life gets in the way, and that's fine. And here we are on a beautiful Sunday afternoon.
Yes, it was. And what a lovely introduction. Was that not?
Yes, thank you, Amber Horsburgh, for this great intro. If you don't know about Amber, check out her School of Deep Cuts. If you want to learn more about the music industry, and it's really kind of a hands-on training for people who want to learn things about music marketing. But what she has that I'm really excited to kind of share with folks, I've used this for years, is she has this Music Marketer's Toolbox, and it's basically a Google Doc with everything you need if you're a music marketer. And it's a free resource. So we'll put the link in the show notes. But instead of me telling you about it, I talked to Amber this last week about it. Here's what she had to say. Hi, Amber. Tell us about your Music Marketer's Toolbox.
I created the Music Marketer's Toolbox. I did this back in 2017 when I was running strategy at Downtown Records. And really it was a way to categorize all the tools and websites and technology and apps that me and my team use to work on records and market the records. I basically I categorized it. I kept it as a running list for my team. And then when I ended up leaving the label and starting Deep Cuts, I decided to publish it because there was no place online where you could really, there was no place online where you could find in one spot what are all the reputable tools and resources that an independent artist can use. What I find really useful about the Music Marketer's Toolbox now is it's a growing list. It's up to 163 tools, I believe, since when I'm recording this in November of 2022. And I keep it updated every single year. I do a big audit of it. And what I like about it is when you start from a blank sheet of paper when you're promoting a record, it's really hard because you have the tendency to want to reinvent you want to reinvent the wheel. You forget things that have worked in the past. You start to build up your own systems and processes, and that all takes time. What I've realized is there's a whole suite of tools that are available to you that the same tools that labels use, but that DIY musicians can use as well. And when you start from the tools, it actually gives you an idea of what's available and what the landscape actually looks like. And then it also ensures that you can, it gives you a bit of a leg up because you're not starting from scratch. You're not building your own software, or you're not building out your own Google Sheets, or, corresponding with bloggers, or whatever it is that you want to do. There's usually a tool that has been built and is available to you. So the way that it works is it's basically a spreadsheet. It is broken up into the main functions of music marketing, which are playlisting and streaming, social media and content creation, social media management, analytics, advertising, radio promotions, publicity, and then I've also got in there just other resources that are like, good fun. And yeah, it includes all the different tools that are available to you. So you've also got in there things like, I have a section in each, which is my favorite tool per per discipline. I have all the pricing information in there, which I keep relevant and up to date. I include how I personally use the tools. And then that gives people who aren't so familiar with all the different resources an idea of, what's even available to them. Things like pre-saves or email list building or pitching tools, third-party playlist pitching, even like social content creation, GIF creation, all that kind of stuff that you might be thinking, I want my social media to look better, or but I don't have the skills to be able to do it myself. So that's what the Music Marketer's Toolbox is. The cool thing about the 2022 update is all the students of my flagship program, which is Fan-Based Accelerator, collaborated on this version. So it is not just my personal list of things that I personally use, but it's a list that's now being crowdsourced by over 600 students that are in my courses. And they put it together as a list of things that they use. So that they're tested, that independent artists are actually using them, and they're free on the internet. A lot of them are free on the internet or free with a trial to sign up. So yeah, it's a good one. I use it every day. It's all constantly open up on my my browser. So that's why I decided to build it, and that's what's in it. And you can get it, it's free. Just go to amberhorsburgh.com/toolbox.
Tell us about your world of deep cuts.
The world of deep cuts. So my background is I've been a music marketer for my entire career. I've worked with labels like Atlantic Records, Interscope, Downtown Records. I've worked with, I will turn that off. I've worked with music brands like YouTube Music, Sonos, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify. Who else have I worked with? I've forgotten the list. And then also with artists directly. And what I did in 2021, I stopped working with labels and started building out Fan-Based Accelerator, which is a course for independent artists and managers that gives them the tools to promote their records like a major label. A bit in the vein of the Music Marketer's Toolbox, in that what I recognise is the tools that I use at labels are the same that are available to independent artists, with the exception of, budgets for radio promotion. But that's not really the artists that I'm working with in my programs. And so what I do is I give them all the tools. You get my entire Google Drive of everything from, budgeting templates, budgeting calculators, release playbooks, spreadsheets that'll get you organised from like 30 days out of a release, 60 days, 90 days out of release, social media plans, all that kind of stuff. And then I run you through a program of putting together a release strategy. And what's been really cool is just seeing all the different artists across all different genres that I'm working with, being able to apply the same systems and come out with all these different results. So I've had artists that have been able to quit their retail job and do music full-time within like 4 months of starting the course. I've had artists who have signed record labels off the back of their very first EP. I've had artists who have launched their very first single, got 50,000 streams on it. So what I wanted to do is create a program that is designed for people to get really quick results as a shortcut, rather than just like a content dump of here's a whole bunch of thoughts and feelings about music marketing and interesting things that I might find interesting, but for an artist who is really stretched thin in terms of what they're able to do, they're working on making the music, they might have a day job themselves, they're working towards doing music full-time, and then they've got to turn around and promote the records. I want, for those artists who feel that they're stretched thin, to give them that shortcut, which is like, come in, grab my Google Drive, take all my resources, learn, in the lectures, the foundations of music marketing to be able to set your records up for success. So that is what I do. In there as well, I've got mini courses or more specialized courses. So I've got a TikTok for musicians one. I've also got an Instagram for musicians one, and a YouTube for musicians. But my main signature program is kind of soups to nuts fan-based accelerator, which basically gives you, it's a record label in your pocket or your internet browser, I guess is a better analogy. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat about what I do, and I hope this helps. I hope this helps anybody who's listening.
She is such a sharp cookie. And
yes, she is.
Like, when you always appreciate things or people in this case that have skills that I don't have.
Well,
I
people
appreciate
that share
you
them,
because
right?
you are.
It's not just about having skills, and you have skills that I don't, and vice versa, which is great. But somebody like Amber who helps other people by sharing all of these things. And she has one other thing we're going to add a link to, and that's her music marketing freelance Rolodex. So if you need somebody to do radio or sync or targeted online ads or whatever you need, she's got over 80 people that she knows and trusts to do those kinds of things. So we'll put the links in the show notes for both of these things. But thank you, Amber, for that. We really
Absolutely,
appreciate it.
Amber. Thank you. And it's a fantastic resource. And again, you
good.
and I've talked so many times on the show about, in the early days of music marketing, there were just not that many. Everything wasn't the same, but there were little, kind of verticals that you needed to focus on.
Yeah.
The landscape is so dramatically more complex and complicated. And to have a resource like this is just bitching.
It really is.
You're
really standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. So
absolutely.
So definitely check that out. And if you like what you see, check out Amber's School of Deep Cuts. I wanted to touch base before we get going here on The Ledger, which is Glenn Peoples' weekly newsletter, that if you subscribe to Billboard Pro, you get this and several others every week. And we talk about it quite a bit because he's got this music index. It's really interesting. But this week, he's talking about some of these earning calls, and he has some takeaways that you and I can discuss, because most publicly traded companies have recently released earnings for this last quarter that ended September 30th. And as Glenn points out, most of the results have shown encouraging signs for investors and the music industry alike. So here are 5 quick takeaways from those third quarter earnings. Number 1, the subscription business model is insulating creators and rights holders from economic uncertainty. Music royalties are popular with investors, right? In part because they're counter-cyclical, he says, meaning their returns have little correlation with changes in the broader market. I thought that was really interesting.
Absolutely. Well, and kind of even leading into that, he mentions that there's sort of 2 things going on, which is this sort of stability in the music business, but also the fact that the company's stocks were not performing very well. So it's an interesting time in terms of inflation and things like that, although it seems like it's kind of pulling out of that. But then one of the things he also mentioned is about podcasts. He said podcasts are a growing, stabilizing force. Spotify's podcast business has rightly captured the headlines, of course, but generating advertising revenue, and it improves the gross margins. But so this isn't necessarily hugely about music, but it's just saying that podcasting has really stabilized things for a lot of these music streaming companies because it brings in more revenue. They're not necessarily paying the same amounts of money for that. So we're seeing that being a growing, stabilizing force.
Yeah, absolutely. And next up, audiobooks. So the next one is with share prices relatively low, Glenn points out, companies are increasingly buying back shares to bolster shareholder value and help share prices. Among the companies currently engaged in stock repurpose programs are Spotify, MSG Entertainment, Cumulus Media, Audacity, SiriusXM, Town Square Media, and Live One. And I thought that was really interesting and not something I would have thought of.
And I didn't know that. I mean, that's something that I had not paid attention to, hadn't noticed. So that was really fascinating. Number 4 that he mentioned is the strong growth in, as he in quotation marks refers to, rest of world markets. So, and we've talked about this a few times with various articles over the last year or so about a lot of these historically underrepresented markets, I suppose, really coming online. And that is a huge, huge thing. They mentioned Believe's revenue in Asia Pacific and Africa grew 61% to 52 million euros.
Wow.
Which is about the same as its European revenues, excluding France and Germany. So, and Spotify's rest of the world markets improved their share of monthly active users to 26% in the third quarter, up from 21% in the prior year period. So, again, a lot of these are coming online. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the last one, number 5, spinoffs are going to separate high growth, high potential businesses. MSG Entertainment plans to spin off its MSG Sphere venue, currently under construction in Las Vegas, along with its Tao Hospitality Group. And if you don't know MSG, Madison Square Garden, they control Radio City Music Hall, and MSG Networks and a sports broadcast network. So super interesting stuff. I highly encourage you to subscribe to Billboard Pro, and then you get Glenn's insightful newsletter every week. It's called The Ledger.
Yes, it is. And again, like Amber stuff, it's areas of not my expertise, and so I appreciate when people make it really easy for me to digest these things. Big thanks to Glenn. And boy, you guys have been busy over there at your other podcast, Jay, Behind the Set List. Good Lord. When do you sleep?
Thank you. We had a fun week. We recorded 2 new episodes that they were just really fascinating. One with country artist Sunny Sweeney. She's got a new album called Married Alone. It's phenomenal. She is just a firecracker. I have a deep respect for her. And then one of my favorite bands, Alter Bridge, 3 of the 4 guys from Creed. They have a new album out called Pawns and Kings, and we had an interview with them from Germany. And the Music Biz Weekly podcast, we recorded an episode, kind of an unusual one this last week, with David Leaf. And he's got this book that we talked about called God Only Knows, the story of Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth. And I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart because you've worked with Beach Boys music. You've worked with Capitol. So I'm sure you know a little bit more about how the sausage is made on that. But I did get the book, and it's in orbit. It's going to be on my list here pretty soon.
Well, he has been a long-time chronicler of all things Beach Boys and a lot of great books, and he's very entrenched in the camp. And, it's really remarkable when you think about the Beach Boys that we're still talking about the Beach Boys, and their music is still, you still hear it. They're still out on the road, various incarnations, and they predated the Beatles. Their first records were around 61 and 62.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 60 plus years ago.
And they were so influential, right? I mean, people think of them as kind of that Jan and Dean, surf sound thing. That was one lifetime. But as Brian Wilson kind of spread his wings a little bit and, recorded Pet Sounds, Paul McCartney has made it very clear that the reason Sgt. Pepper happened is because he was in direct competition with Pet Sounds. And that's high praise. And
as Brian would say, the reason that Pet Sounds happened was because Rubber Soul happened. And so, there was all of this,
wow.
And Brian, really even a little teeny bit, or yes, almost a little bit before the Beatles, was really kind of doing that in the studio for a long period of time and, really directing everything and controlling everything. And that was very unique.
Did I ever tell you that my first paid photography gig was Brian Wilson? I don't know if I ever told you that.
No, you did not tell me.
Yeah, I was shooting him for the cover of a magazine, and I went to his house, and his publicist met me there, and they said, where do you want to start? And I said, well, let's take some pictures here, and they told me they had an upright piano in the back, and so after we took some photos in the front, we went to the back, and true story, I'm taking photos of him playing piano, And I stopped taking photos. I was just mesmerized. I'm sitting there staring at him because it was just me and him in the room. Wow. And after about probably 10 seconds, it seemed like eternity, he kind of looks over at me like, aren't you supposed to be taking photos? I mean, he didn't say anything. He just kind of looked at me like, what are you doing? And then, oh, yeah. And I took photos and I took some pictures in his backyard and stuff. But it was, for me, he's one of those living legends, living icons. And it was just such an honor to shoot him. But yeah, this book, can't wait to read it. And David Leaf also co-wrote Kiss Behind the Mask with Ken Sharp. And it was interesting to hear about that because I have the book and I've read the book, but I didn't realize that it was basically a book David Leaf had written back in the late 70s and that Ken Sharp kind of brought back to life and added to it. So now I need to kind of reread that book. But David Leaf's written tons of books. He's a professor at UCLA. Hopefully we can collaborate on something at UCLA, but a lot of respect for him. And that was a really fun interview too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got another survey coming up, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, if you look in your morning coffee, there's a MIDiA survey. And we're asking primarily artists and managers, how do you release music? And so they have this survey, and if you fill it out, you get a chance to win, $1,000 in prizes. The last survey we did, you got a free report by entering, but it only takes a couple of minutes, and I highly recommend if you are an artist or a manager that you fill out that MIDiA survey. We really dig those guys over at MIDiA.
And by the way, man that never sleeps, you got something going on over there at Cal State Northridge as well, right?
Yeah, I had a guest lecture yesterday.
And Colorado State.
Yeah, that's where my daughter graduated from college. She's going to go back for her PhD next year. So I've been out to Colorado State a lot, and their music business program is legit. I mean, it's a beast, and I'm so honored that in I think about 3 weeks, I'm going to go out there to Fort Collins and meet up and do a guest lecture with their music business program. But yesterday I did a guest lecture with Cal State Northridge, Dave Bakula, who's a dear friend and one of the best people I know in the music industry when it comes to data. But it was amazing. I mean, the questions, these young, I call them kids, but these young adults,
they are kids, Jay.
They are so insightful and they're just looking at the business in a different way. And I think we talked for like 2 hours. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. Well, in case you don't know, the man who never sleeps is also known as Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant. He's the curator of the fabulous weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, which, of course, is the basis of this podcast. He's also a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, Warner Music Groups, and Fox Home Entertainment. And yes, he goes to bed very late and wakes up very early.
I'm like an old man. I'm in bed so early. It's crazy. Unless I'm going to a show. The guy sitting across from me, my dear friend, Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Groups.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of staying up late, I went to see Psychedelic Furs in L.A. What night was that? Thursday night,
What was the venue?
It was the Belasco Theater, which is downtown L.A., a beautiful theater.
Really?
And I went with my friend Sam Gay from EM. We met at EMI, and when I need go-to information on how vinyl is manufactured and timelines and all that stuff, Sam Gay is my man.
We should have him on.
He knows so much. Oh yes, absolutely. But it was a late night, and it's like, oh, that's right. I used to do this all the time. But it was a fun show. They sounded great, but it's a beautiful, like there's so many things in downtown LA that are these beautiful old theaters that were built in the 1920s, and this was one of those ornate. I sent you a picture actually from the show, but oh boy, the sound was terrible. I mean, you could tell the band sounded great. That. I mean, they played great, but it was just we were by the sound man, and boy, I could tell he was just fighting the room all night.
I was going to ask you, was it the room?
Yeah, it's the room. It must be a bear to get a good sound in there, and because they were really trying hard, but it was a little too loud also. So it was that kind of combination of too loud and just not. A lot of weird overtones and stuff. It was. I've been there. If you've ever mixed a room, it's if it's fighting you, it's really hard to to get it under control. But
Yeah.
whatever. It's still fun to go out, see shows, and see bands that were, and these guys are, gosh, they're no kids. I mean, they started having hits they started recording in the late 70s, psychedelic first. But they still sound great, 3 original members, I think. So
that's great. I'm going to go see Immediate Family on Friday.
That's right. I know they're playing.
Yeah, they're going to be playing near you too. I was thinking of even going up there, but this one's going to be so close to me. But for those who don't know Immediate Family, I mean, you do know who these guys are. You just may not know the name Immediate Family. And I think we've mentioned it before. It's Danny Korchmar on guitar, and it's Waddy Wachtel, and it's Russ Kunkel on drums, and Leland Sklar, and Steve Postel. I mean, these guys are on all of your favorite records, or at least a lot of mine, like Jackson Browne and Bonnie Raitt and James Taylor and Carole King's Tapestry. And holy cow, there's a documentary that's just, I think, at the film festivals right now that's coming out. I've only seen like 10 minutes of it, but really looking forward to seeing Immediate Family this Friday.
And Denny Tedesco is doing the documentary, is he not?
I think
did
so.
The Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
And of
So
course
good.
he's the son of the famous studio musician Tommy Tedesco. So anyway, we are going all over the place today,
I know.
Jay. It's
Well,
kinda
let's
fun.
before we
Lots
get
of
into
different-
things, we need to thank our sponsors.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. The Your Morning Coffee podcast is brought to you by our good and groovy friends over at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a beautiful website and EPK for your music. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters, social media integrations, and live support from their very musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can jump over to bandzoogle.com and try it free for 30 days. Just use the promo code MORNINGCOFFEE, all one word, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code MORNINGCOFFEE.
I don't know if I ever told you, but my buddy Dave Cool, and yeah, that's really his name, Dave Cool. He's their chief relationship officer at Bandzoogle. And it's so funny when I get an email from him because, the footer, it says, Dave Cool. Yes, that's my real name. So good. The Your Morning Coffee podcast is also brought to you by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music business and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla, Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
My first app on my first iPhone, Bands in Town. Over 74 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform connecting over 560,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Yes. And we're also so thrilled to have as a sponsor the Music Business Association, which I'm a member. For more than 6 decades, the Music Biz Conference has been the point of origin for inspiration and collaboration in the music business. Join us in Nashville, May 15th through the 18th. And I think I told you last week, I've been attending this thing for 30 years.
That's right. And Jay loves to buy drinks for people at that event, so you better go. That's what I'm saying. So big thanks to Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. Boy, we appreciate it. Could not do it without y'all.
We appreciate it
very much. Yes, indeed. All right, Jay, what do you say? Let's jump into some
Let's do it.
stories here. The first one is from Hypebot and Mark Mulligan over there at MIDiA with 100,000 tracks uploaded daily. A long-tail music cull is coming. And cull.
Yeah.
What was the exact definition of cull? I mean, it's trimming, or is it?
I thought it was
know
gathering. Like gathering together,
Maybe so.
culling something together. I would
maybe
bet,
so.
Yeah, he says that with that 100,000 tracks being uploaded to Spotify and other DSPs, it's led to each of these DSPs housing 100 million tracks. Okay, we talk about that pretty regularly. And as that total sort of balloons, artists and labels are overcrowded, fans are overwhelmed, and streaming services struggle to keep up. And as you mentioned, this is Mark Mulligan from MIDiA, but he's also, you'll see him on the music industry blog, one of our favorite sources for music info.
So what he's saying too is, if especially given the recent elections, he says, when governments plan to introduce controversial new policies, they prepare the ground in advance, including dropping hints in speeches, privately briefing journalists, etc., so that by the time the new policy finally arrives, it does not feel quite so controversial.
Genius.
And as he said, a similar process is currently playing out in the music business. The biggest major label executives are starting to seed a narrative into the marketplace about the potentially corrosive effect that the rapidly growing long tail of music and creators is having on consumers' music streaming experiences. Of course, it also happens to dent major label market share too. But the issue is not quite as clear as that might first appear.
Yeah.
But we're talking about three main industry constituents that are at risk from the fattening of the long tail, as he says. I'll let you take it from there.
Right. Well, the first one is major labels and their artists, right? The second one, consumers, and then 3, long tail creators. So let's take a look at those 3 things. Major labels, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this week, because you have to look at these numbers a little bit, because something in here really jumped out at me, and that is that, over the course of like 5 years, 2016 to 2021, the majors grew recorded music revenue by 71%. Pretty impressive, right?
Yes.
Well, but take a look at the indies. The indies grew revenues by 318% over the same period. Consequently, artists direct, indie artists, increased global market share from 2.3% to 5.3% in that same time period, while majors went from 68.8 and actually dropped to 65.5. So I thought that was really interesting.
Jay, it sounds like you're telling me that indies are taking some market share from the major labels.
Yeah, a little bit. So it's not all about, people being overwhelmed. It's also about, in this pro rata model that we talk about, and you're paid on market share, that's not a good thing if you're losing market share.
No, it's not. No, it's not. So other things, other people to factor into this are consumers.
Sure.
He says this one is far harder to make a definitive case either for or against. Consumers tend to not categorize music anywhere near as precisely as the music business. And
Absolutely.
we learned that back in our days of catalog marketing, Yep. He says, for example, only a third of consumers say they mainly listen to older music, despite industry stats showing that catalog consumption dominates. Most consumers do not consider music to be old, in quotation marks, as soon as the music business does.
Right,
so imagine
that's that 18-month thing that we all talk about,
yes,
right?
It's we always talk about that.
And you and I have pretty strong opinions about this. This is a really good point, because most consumers, he's saying, they don't think they really listen to old music. But if you designate it as catalog after 18 months, therein lies the discrepancy, right?
That's right. To them, a 3-year-old track is not that old because it's not that old.
I agree.
But to the music business, that's twice the 18-month number. So it's been well considered catalog by major labels. Exactly. So, so the consumers consistently hear, so we're in the realms of measuring second-order effects, what they call. Are consumers disengaging from streaming? Not yet, but they might, and of making logical assumptions. If consumers consistently hear poorer quality music, then it's reasonable to assume that their satisfaction would decline. Maybe the quality of music being associated with indie acts or something like that. However, DSP algorithms push music that matches users' tastes, and there's so much high quality in the long tail that there's no particular reason to assume that more long-tail consumption should inherently equate to an increase in consumption of poorer quality music. So this is, what it sounds like to me is, let me think of reasons why I want this to happen, and let me build a story. And so here we are.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to tell you that, and you already know this, that whether it's indie or major doesn't necessarily have any bearing on the quality of the music. There is world-class music put out by the majors, and there's world-class music put out by indies. And I would argue that sheer volume, there's more put out by the indies. And yes, you could argue that when there's no barrier to entry, like let's say SoundCloud, there's some great music on SoundCloud, but there is some not so great music on SoundCloud because, most of the DSPs have about 100 million tracks, whereas SoundCloud has well north of 300 million. And you and I could record something in our kitchen today and upload it to SoundCloud. There's really no barrier to entry. So that leads us into number 3, the long tail creators. It may sound oxymoronic, I love that word, to suggest that long tail creators could be hurt by the rise of the long tail. But as Will Page puts it, the rise of the long tail means that there are more mouths to feed. The fractionalized nature of streaming royalties means that the more long tail creators there are, the lower per stream counts there are, right? And even more important, the harder it is to cut through. So it's really interesting. This isn't going to go away anytime soon. This is, I don't know if you saw the photo I put in your morning coffee, but it was somebody actually drinking out of a fire hose.
I did see that. It's crazy. But, he points out here the missing constituency is the DSPs themselves. But they do not they don't warrant a place here because they are the ones with the power to scale up or down long tail consumption via their algorithms. It serves DSPs to have listening fragment to a degree as it lessens the share and therefore the power of any individual label. But if DSPs ever thought they were pushing too far, then they would rein in the algorithms. So this, like you were saying, this really feels like majors pushing something to get more market share. And let me show you reasons why we want that to happen, say the majors.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting about this because, again, indie music, although it may threaten the market share of some of the major labels, it's world class. It's great stuff. And there are things that are considered indie that are really sort of major because they come through the major indies. For example, if music that comes out through The Orchard or In Grooves or AWOL and Symphonic and some of these things, there's some amazing music coming through there. I remember when I was working with WIA ADA, I'll cite some of the labels that we were working at that time were like Beggars, Sub Pop, Merge. These things they're just like a major in the quality of the music they're putting out, but they're considered to be an indie, even though they're maybe distributed by a major.
Well, and, the percentage of people that care is so small. I don't know what the number is, but my guess is it's like maybe 1% that people didn't even notice what label a given act or a song that they like and an artist they like and they're listening to.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Well, you and I do because we find this stuff interesting, and I know Elton John cares, but you are absolutely right. There was a time in the music industry when, let's say it was, Motown, these labels had a particular personality and sound. And as much as I love Interscope and Atlantic, you don't say to me, hey, what came out on Interscope this week or Atlantic this week? Because there's so many different genres and moods and styles and everything that, just because you like one, you may not like the other. So I would tend to agree with you, Mike. I think that's spot on.
But as Mark says, so what's next? He says, so where does this all leave us? He says, in the do nothing scenario, let's say nothing happens, listening continues to splinter, majors lose more share, long tail creators find it hard to cut through and earn, while consumers may or may not see any meaningful change to their listening experience. In short, the head loses out, as does the long tail, while the market further consolidates around the body of streaming catalog, which, by the way, the majors are already key players in and could easily ramp up their focus, as WMG is already doing, actually, Warner Music Group. Then he says the do something options. So that's what happens if we don't do anything. So the do something options fall into two key groups. One is gate or limit consumer access to catalog. And number two is gate or limit creator access to royalties. I don't like either of those, to be honest, Jay. He
No.
says there are many ways to achieve the first, which is the gate limit consumer access to catalog, preventing long-tail music getting onto DSP catalogs, lowering long-tail priority in algorithms, creating a separate tier of catalog, deprioritizing, blocking it from search and discovery, etc. All of this risks looking very much like the establishment trying to prevent the next generation of creator and industry breaking through. That is without even considering the moral dilemmas of choosing who is in and who is out.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I agree with that. Let's look at option 2, right? That could be more altruistic than it looks, Mark points out. For an enthusiast hobbyist with a few hundred streams, royalties are going to be a little more than a novelty, but for a hardworking, self-releasing singer-songwriter with tens of thousands of streams, the hundreds of dollars are already important. Let's consider that there was a payout threshold where 1,000 annual streams are the point at which royalties are paid. With all the royalties associated with the sub 1,000 stream artist being distributed between all other artists, suddenly those slightly more established long-tail artists can earn more income. Interesting take on that. I don't know how I feel about that yet.
I don't either. But he says none of these options are without challenges and moral dilemmas, but the direction of travel appears to be towards something being done, in quotation marks, about the long tail. If that really does end up having to happen, then let us at least try to ensure that the changes benefit long tail artists too, not just the superstars. And as I'm sitting here kind of thinking about that, so somebody like Spotify is in a bit of a trick bag here because they are owned by the majors. I mean, or a percentage of them is owned by the major labels. So they've got that pressure of the major labels coming at them and saying, trying to promote what they want to happen. But then they also have a business case to say, well, because for an independent artist to put stuff up, they pay a monthly fee or an annual fee or whatever it is, right? You can't. It's very rarely for free that they put it.
Well, they don't pay Spotify. They pay their distributor, which could be CD Baby, DistroKid, Stem, whatever, right?
Exactly. Right.
And so there's
money. But there's money coming in from artists, whether they get played or not. And so somebody down the line makes money by artists putting up their music. So does this mean that maybe a company that has investment from a major label will do one thing and another DSP will do another, and they won't trim their long tail catalog? I could see sort of a weird scenario happening that, like does Apple care what the majors think regarding all of the tracks that are on their service?
No, I don't think they
Probably
do at
not.
all. But I think there's also a difference between what you and I consider the pure play DSP like Spotify, that is their business. And yes, they're getting into audiobooks and podcasts and all these other things, but primarily that's their business, whereas Apple is just one of many businesses, same with Google. But I tend to think that we might be overthinking this. Unless there's some kind of server space, I don't see how it harms the business by having this massive amount of music, other than that it might hurt the market share of certain labels. And there could be some rules put in there to adjust for that. But in general, I'm a believer that, it's fair game. It's a meritocracy. It's if you want to put up a great quality song, whether it's through TikTok or SoundCloud or wherever, and get it to the digital service providers, I think you should have the same kind of shot that Billie Eilish has. So, but that's just my opinion.
I agree. We've also mentioned that website Forgotify that has a number that you can go on there and be the first to listen to just a plethora of songs that have never been played before that are up on the services. I would love to, and I don't know if you have ever seen this, but I would love to know what percentage of music on a given DSP has never been played. That's in their system.
Yeah, I had read an article for Your Morning Coffee. This is a while back, and it was like 17 million tracks that they had designated as not being played once. But that's, of course, it's 100 million now, but I think back then it was maybe 60, 70 million. But yeah, I'd be interested to seeing that too. But anyway,
I thought 60, 70 million.
Yeah, I thought this was
that's 25% or give whatever. That's a big number that had never been played.
Yeah, and so we'll see how this thing plays out. But a really interesting take. Anytime Mark Mulligan writes anything, I'm going to read it. I've learned a lot from Mark and his team over there at MIDiA. They do some of the best research in the music business globally. They're awesome.
Absolutely. But I think the most interesting thing about this is that are conversations being had right now, and kind of a what's the phrase? What's the right word? There's sort of a story being set that
I like the way they laid that out.
Like this. I do too. Yes. So that we shall see where that goes. But very interesting story from the guys over there. Big thanks. Let's go to our second story,
Sure.
Jay. This is from Bloomberg. Record labels ask TikTok to share more of its $12 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big
Who wants to
story
make
this
that
week.
first call? Yeah.
Because I'm hearing that the payouts are incredibly low. And I believe our friend Glenn over at Billboard is working on a piece to kind of dig in and find out how those payouts actually work. I think he was talking about potentially doing that at some point. But this piece, as you point out, is from Bloomberg, and it was written by Olivia Salon, Lucas Shaw, and Giles Turner. We don't put a lot of Bloomberg articles in your morning coffee. They're very good, but typically places like Music Business Worldwide and MIDiA and Hypebot and Variety. I mean, there's so many of these other sources, Rolling Stone, that tend to dig deeper into the music business and not just the financial part of it that I think maybe Bloomberg leans a little bit more towards. But this particular piece, I thought they nailed it. They kick it off by saying that TikTok has attracted more than 1 billion users, with videos set to music. Now, the world's largest record labels want the social media app to pay more for those songs. So it's Universal, Sony, Warner. They're asking TikTok to share the advertising, and that's key right there, the advertising revenue, and increase their royalties that it pays them for the rights, according to people familiar with the talks. The companies have been negotiating all year and are trying to reach a deal before their contracts expire in the coming months, said the people, who asked not to be identified. Interesting.
Although it was, or maybe it was intentional, we're kind of suddenly talking about the major labels trying to get their hands into lots of different pots of money at the moment. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or if, I just don't know.
Well, I think that, and you and I have been in some of these meetings where there are companies that were trying to make their revenue off the backs of music companies. And some of the teams that we worked for, it was their job to make sure that they were paid for that. And there were some early things like people complain about MTV back in the day because it started off as this promotional thing that quickly became this bigger thing. And we're saying like, well, why aren't we being paid for this? Same with MP3 players, right? Same with a lot of different things, social media, Peloton bikes, the list goes on and on. And TikTok is making their business largely in part because of music. And it's my humble opinion that they should pay for that.
Agreed. But that's an awkward conversation to have, to say the least.
You just hit it right on the head. Hey. It's an awkward conversation, but why? And that why is, well, wait a second, we're blowing up your business in some ways, in a good way. I mean, like we're giving you all this business, so we're a promotional thing, but yet you're also building your business on this. So how do you strike that balance without, killing this golden goose?
And what leverage do the majors have to actually get it?
Withhold their music?
Know. I guess.
But would you want to do that if it's promoting? Yeah. And these aren't easy situations.
Or do you want to be the first? Even more. Yeah, I'm sure they all want to do it, but who wants to be the first? It's like the raising of rates.
The pricing thing that you talked about, right?
Yes, exactly. So I don't know. So according to the article, Jay, as TikTok has grown in popularity, it's become one of the music industry's, obviously, most powerful kingmakers. Record labels rely on TikTok to identify promising artists and to market new releases. It's the single most important marketing tool the companies have, according to our friend Mark Mulligan, an analyst over at MIDiA. It says here, the social media app has started to profit from its popularity. It earned $4 billion in revenue last year and is on track for $12 billion in 2022, hence the 12 billion number. According to the research firm eMarketer, the music companies want TikTok to share more of that money, compensating them with a cut of their advertising sales based on their place. Got that. Okay. And as an executive at one of the major labels said that TikTok should be paying between 2 and 10 times more than its existing agreement based on similar relationships with other platforms with large audiences such as Facebook and YouTube.
Right. And as
always
they say,
hard to
go ahead.
It's always hard to sign a contract and then renegotiate that quickly.
It is, but as they point out in this article, these contracts, these terms are coming to an end. So that's why the negotiations are happening now. The music groups are weighing how to best increase their payouts from TikTok without getting into a public dispute with one of their most important partners. That's what we were referring to. TikTok has positioned itself as a promotional tool that doesn't need to pay in the same way as Spotify or YouTube. We've heard this before. It's a complement to music listening, not a replacement for it, the company argues. Interesting. I see how they're going to play this.
Yes, exactly. And but of course the owner of what also makes it interesting is that the parent company of TikTok is ByteDance. And don't forget, ByteDance has already created a paid music service called Resso in 2019 and introduced it in 3 markets. These are out of the U.S. markets. But Resso has tens of millions of monthly active users, according to people familiar with the business. But the service has thus far struggled to convert many of them into paying subscribers. But if we talked about an article maybe 3 weeks ago, I think, about them expanding Resso. So when we talked about leverage, so suddenly if they're going to expand their paid music service, they need the catalogs. So this is, I suppose, where we're going to see that leverage being played out is that, okay, so you don't want to pay that money, then we're not going to license our catalogs to Resso. So there's the lever.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right. And
perhaps.
I think you have to look at majors versus indies too, because if you look at Sony, Warner, Universal, they've all announced that their current deals, with TikTok, they're coming up, in like one of them is this month. I think they said, I think Sony is November, which is now. Warner is January 2021. Universal's February of 2021. So these companies continue to collect flat fees instead of a cut of revenue or a cut of advertising, in part because TikTok was just starting to figure out its advertising business, and those contracts last for 2 years. They're just about to expire. Although the parties tend to reach short-term extensions, during negotiations rather than letting, the contracts lapse. So that's the major side. On the indie side, TikTok's deal with Merlin, which represents indie labels, that expired at the start of the year. And the two sides have a short-term extension to avoid needing to remove music from the service. So record labels and publishers gave TikTok a license to monetize their catalogs while they figured it out, Mark Mulligan said. And he said now they've figured it out.
Well, Mark mentions the label's uneasy relationship with TikTok, which Mark described as being schizophrenic, reminds executives of their decade-long disputes with YouTube and Facebook. Music companies criticized their business partners in Silicon Valley for years, claiming they didn't do enough to halt piracy and that they got rich off their work. YouTube and Facebook positioned themselves as marketing tools, as you mentioned that TikTok is as well. But don't forget, record labels push YouTube to offer a subscription-based music service, arguing it would make a fortune if it converted even a small percentage of its 2 billion users into paying customers. And there, YouTube's initial forays into paid streaming bore little fruit, and many music executives believed YouTube wasn't really trying. What?
There it is. All right.
But yeah, but of course that they did try, and of course, it's added more than 50 million paying customers. We're going to actually give some other numbers later that are very impressive. So you can kind of see, but yet to your point when you were talking, we used to see this all the time. This battle between content creators and owners, and Silicon Valley or tech startups. Everybody's got a different view of who's right and what their priorities are. And this has gone for the last 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And it's still going.
Well, this is really super interesting. Great piece. We're going to be watching in the coming months as these new contracts happen, because my gut tells me they're going to be paying a little bit more for the music that they've made $12 billion on in 2022, right?
I'm pretty sure that's going to
go.
happen. Absolutely. Now, every now and again, there's a story where I go, oh yeah, I'm an old guy. I don't get fill in the blanks. This next story is, I don't get this from a song interest standpoint. This is from Billboard. Sped up songs are taking over TikTok and driving songs up the charts.
Yeah.
Sped up songs.
Yeah. It's a thing.
Guy, Jay.
It's a thing. I've been seeing a lot of this lately. Actually, for the last year, I've seen a ton of this. The story is written by our friend Elias Light for Billboard. And, he says that hard-charging reworks of popular singles have been thriving on the social media platform, meaning TikTok, and that labels are leaning into the trend. And I first started seeing this about a year ago with some of these. I'm looking at the discographies on digital service providers, and I'm seeing, sped up songs. I'm seeing reverbed songs. I'm seeing slowed down songs. And as I kind of Googled it, I found that it's what this article says. They're basically, people are making TikTok videos to these versions.
Yes.
And some of them are silly, where it sounds almost like a mouse. It's sped up so fast. Some of them, it's very subtle. I believe it was Ghost, Mariana Cross. There's a version, but they're kind of like the soundtrack to some of these short form video that you see on TikTok and their competitors.
Yeah, but by themselves, just the music part of it is just, in many times to me, unlistenable. It's like, oh my God, that's horrible.
Well, you're not 16.
No, I'm not 16. I'm several multiples of 16. I just don't get it, and there I am feeling like an old guy. But it's interesting too is that, again, these songs aren't meant to necessarily stand alone, right? They're really meant to accompany a video, or are they?
I think they are. I think there's a quote in here from Josh Berman. He said, "Sped up tracks feel like a thing," and I was not expecting it to happen to Thundercat, that Thundercat song, "Them Changes." That's they mentioned in the article. It's steeped in funk history, and they talk about some of these songs and all these different label reps that are starting to jump on board. So sped up versions of songs, especially older ones, have thrived on TikTok for years. Demi Lovato track, Ellie Goulding's Lights, Sam Smith's I'm Not the Only One, Nelly Furtado's Say It Right. There's a lot of these things. And I guess, they say they've been around for years. I didn't notice them really years ago, although I have heard some of those versions as I'm going through TikTok and I hear a sped up song or a slowed down song. I had just assumed that the end user was doing that, not that it was an official release.
Right. And end users can do that, with the tools now that are out there. It's so easy to do that. In the article, this Nima Nasseri, who's the global head of A&R strategy for Universal Music Group's music strategy and tactics team, she said, and I remember this, of course, back in the day, we used club remixes to diversify the visibility of a record, and I was involved in a number of those things. And she said the purpose was to bring back visibility to the main version. This is what's interesting. Now people are discovering the main version from the sped up or slowed one. Instead of spending $50,000 for a remix from some big name DJ, you're spending relatively minimal amounts on a sped up rendition and getting much more return and reach.
Yeah.
It's simple to do, if you know anything about these tools.
Right. Yeah. And Tatiana Cirisano over from MIDiA. She said that we're seeing in consumer surveys how much Gen Z wants to actively participate in music. And we see this all the time with short form video and with social media, with YouTube and editing. And it could be loops and beats and, edits. The end user is now, because of technology, is now able to participate in a much deeper way than maybe when you and I were growing up in the business.
Right. Now, we talked about about listeners making these mixes. And of course, historically, the music industry has not been comfortable with unauthorized mixes. But the two folks talked in here who worked for that department at UMG. They mentioned that even with them kind of trying to get the internal labels to do it, they initially encountered a lot of resistance from artists' team when they started pushing to release official tempo altered versions of singles. And they said it was 6 months of explaining to people what this is and begging them to approve it. And they said there was a long period of trust us on this, in quotation marks, but they're basically selling it internal at these labels as this is the new remix, this is better than a remix. So this is, I suppose this is just another thing that's happening, and that's and we've done club mixes and stuff like that for the last 40 years. So
but you have to have a special skill to do a remix.
Yes.
In a good way,
yes,
I think.
Absolutely.
But if you're speeding up, slowing down, reverbing something, I think anybody can really kind of do that. And my friend Johnny Cloherty over from Songfluencer was quoted in this article. He said that the platform is awash, the platform meaning TikTok, is awash in sped up versions, slowed down versions, clap track versions that are super heavy on reverb, like turned all the way up to 11 kind of shit, he said, and everybody's experimenting with this stuff.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw this stat in here. I thought it was really interesting. This Jacob Burns, who's a director of creator relations and content strategy for Universal Music, said that he recently had a meeting with TikTok marketing that informed him that, are you ready for this? That 80% of the top 100 sounds on TikTok were tempo altered. Some sprint while others crawl. 80%. What?
Sheesh. Okay. It's a thing. It's a real thing, without a doubt. But it's coming. It's there. Yes. Yeah. And there you have it. So
interesting trend, though.
Yeah, it is
right?
interesting. Of course, it is. Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say on this thing is, I don't know. This is maybe 10 years ago. I started seeing these videos on YouTube that were just the album image and then the audio bed. And I was thinking to myself, this isn't a video. This is just the audio. Right. And why is this a thing? And then in the coming years, I learned because people make playlists out of it and because a user can create it. And I think it's similar to some of this stuff, that there's a low barrier to entry, that anybody can do it, and there's a purpose for it. And, look, if it leads them to listen to more music by your artists, why not?
Yeah. Okay, I feel like the Clint Eastwood character, where he says, "Get off my lawn." Yeah.
All right, I get that.
So,
yeah,
exactly. All right, our last story is YouTube's automated copyright tool riles up musicians. Jay, that's in Marketplace. I know a little bit about this, but I
thought you might
a ton about the tool.
Well, we hear
but I don't know much.
We hear about these people that we love, and we look at their YouTube channels. Rick Beato is one, for example, and you will see him, play his guitar and show you how this one intro was played, and I love that stuff. And I know he's run into issues as well.
Yes, he has.
There's this content ID for people who don't know that. Let's just use YouTube, for example, YouTube's content ID that will quickly and accurately, typically,
in quotation marks.
Yes, they'll figure out really quickly if you're playing somebody else's music, even if you're not using their master recording, even if you're doing showing somebody how that riff was played. And I reached out to a music industry attorney of mine, and I was saying, like, well, wait a second, isn't that doesn't that fall under fair use? And the one thing I've learned from attorneys is that there's really not black and white when it comes to the law, that there's, it's how it's done, when it's done, where it's done. There's all sorts of variables. But the thing that he kind of educated me on was they're not pulling this down from YouTube in these instances that I was citing. They're demonetizing them. There's a big difference.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. If they yank down your stuff, that's one thing. And then I started talking to a friend of mine who does this, not for a living, but does a lot of these kind of like lessons online where he shows you how a certain lick was played or a riff or something like that. And he was upset saying, well, how can they demonetize? I'm the one doing the work. And I said, well, I kind of see their side though, because this is the publisher owns this, or the artist or whoever it is, the underlying music. So shouldn't they be properly monetized too?
Well, my understanding of publishing, though, is that the only thing you can copyright is lyrics and melody. So if I play the bass line, and it mentions this in here, let's say I go online and this one of the people interviewed here does a kind of basically it's sort of guitar lessons, and he mentioned he played the bass line for Africa, the Toto song,
right,
and it got yanked. Okay, so that bass line,
it didn't get yanked. It got demonetized.
Yes. It got demonetized,
yes.
Exactly. Same thing, but almost the same thing. If I understand publishing correctly, the bass line in Africa is not copyrighted. The melody and the lyrics are, but not the bass line or the drum part.
Is that right?
Or the synth line. I believe that's the case.
We need to ask a lawyer because you
Yes.
could be right. I don't know. I really don't. I'm going to make a note.
I think that's correct.
I'm going to find out.
Yeah, we'll find that out. But it's one of those things that is important, and I'm with you. I think if it's a full song, then it should be properly monetized to whomever has the copyright on that. But if you're just kind of playing the parts of it individually, or like I don't know. It seems to me that's what Rick Beato complains about, and lots of other people as well. It's like, it seems not right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But we'll do some more digging around on this. I threw it in there because I thought it was really interesting. That this is actually a thing. And I love those videos just like you do. Rick Beato is one of my favorite destinations on YouTube. It's just a joy to watch these videos and how he talks about, how a song was constructed, or he'll play a part, or he'll show you the chord structure of a song. And it's just gold. It's just so great. And so I'm hoping that there is some fair use involved in this where we can have people like Rick Beato do these things. So I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, it's a good one. So anyway, on that note, definitely check it out, and we're going to get back to everyone on that.
Yes,
as well,
we will.
When we talk to some legal minds that are certainly greater than ours. And on that note, we are going to wrap up this episode. Boy, Jay and I certainly appreciate you listening in. We also want to thank our sponsors, the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. Boy, we are so appreciative to have them as partners tremendously. So on behalf of Jay Gilbert, the man who never sleeps, and myself, we say thanks, and we'll see you next week on the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.